Hello, I'm Tosca Bruno van Vijveken and I co-direct the Transnational NGO Initiative at the Maxwell School at Syracuse University. Today I'm undertaking a brief interview with Maliha Khan, the Director of Program Impact at CARE USA, based in Atlanta, its headquarters. Thank you, Maliha, for allowing us today to do this interview with you for our website. This will be a very helpful illustration for students. My interview today is going to consist of two parts. The first part will be more about the kind of issues and challenges that you work on and that your organization is facing. The second part will be a couple of additional questions about career issues that you might shed light on. So first of all, for those who don't really know CARE US, what is the nature and mission of its organization?
CARE is a humanitarian and development organization. It started out right after the Second World War. And it's been, its mission currently, just changed slightly over the years, but its current mission is actually to help eliminate poverty across the world. And in doing so, it works with communities in long-term programs with a particular focus on women and girls.
I see, a focus on women and girls. And am I right in thinking that CARE US is part of a global confederation? You're part of an even bigger global organization?
Yeah, there's a confederation of CAREs around the world. There's 11 lead CARE members, which consists of countries like CARE UK, CARE Austria, CARE Canada, etc. And in addition to that, we actually have three members that are southern affiliates. So Brazil, Thailand, and now in transition we have India and Peru, which are going to become independent CARE members.
I see. And CARE USA fulfills a pretty important role in the global confederation, correct?
Yeah, it's the largest CARE member, both by size, by the number of countries it has a presence in, as well as the amount of funds its channels.
And so that viewers know, how large is your annual budget?
Well, CARE USA's budget is somewhere around the mid 600 millions, and then all of CARE's budget usually goes to between 725 to 750 million.
You mean globally?
Globally.
Right. Now, what is the particular organizational issue and challenge that you work on as Director of Program Impact? What does that mean?
Yeah, what I'm charged with in the organization is actually trying to figure out how a large, dispersed and diverse NGO like CARE tells its global impact measurement story. So what are we contributing to this fight against poverty? What are we doing within the world of development? How can we measure our impact globally across many different diverse initiatives? And how can we take that information that we collect and actually be able to analyze what our contribution has been to these larger global changes that we want to see?
That sounds like both methodologically complex undertaking and also politically somewhat sensitive in certain cases.
It is, and methodologically, when I first came into this job, I actually thought the methodology part would be, the technical part would be the most difficult part, because it is quite a challenging thing. How do you come up with common indicators? How do you measure them across, different contexts? How do you maintain consistency and rigor in how you measure, et cetera, et cetera. But I've actually found that that's the relatively easy part of the work we're doing, because managing the internal change processes, because becoming the organization that can measure its impact globally and to be able to do it rigorously and to be able to tell that story to a diverse stakeholder audience actually requires quite a bit of change within the organization.
Yes.
And change in an organization, the size and diversity and autonomy of the CARE Confederation is quite a difficult process to manage.
Yes.
And then on top of that, we do a lot of our work through partners. We have a lot of donors. So it's not just CARE deciding, we're going to do this. It's actually taking a large group of stakeholders along with us.
Yes. Now, in addition to that particular challenge that you and your unit works on, having to do with organizational performance and how to measure that, what are some of the other core challenges that CARE US currently is facing, and how is it dealing with those?
Well, obviously the challenge on everybody's mind over the last few years has been the financial crisis and the impact on resources and that we can generate, both for our own operations as well as the people we work with. I mean, they're also being affected, so it's a context of the need is greater and the resources are fewer. And I think that's, you know, the major thing that everyone has been dealing with. We've done relatively okay in that. I think we had a few, you know, a bit of a downturn, but we're now stabilizing and we're being able to meet our resource needs. That's I wouldn't call it a short term, but that's the most immediate thing that we're facing. But in addition to that, there are broader questions such as what is the role of an INGO? What is the space for global civil society? And how would CARE continue to function in that role? We have a long history, and we need to move with the sort of changes that are happening globally around governance, around aid delivery, and so forth. And so just trying to meet those challenges in the context that we're in, where there's uncertainty, there's risk, and there's resource challenges is never easy.
That's quite a comprehensive answer. Now, this actually question comes back to your core expertise. How does CARE US define effectiveness? How does it know when you're effective, and how does your organization assess that? Well, the last question should be really easy for you.
Yeah, well, easy to say.
Easy to say, but not how to implement.
Hard to do.
Yeah.
Well, we define our effectiveness based on sort of a pyramid model that we have, in which we assess our performance. And we look at it as how well are we doing in the systems that we have operationally within the organization. So we look at our finance system, procurement, and HR, etc. And we try to assess how well we're doing in that and to keep tabs on it, because we have to be an efficient organization in order to be an effective organization. But in order to be effective, there has to be a little bit more than just efficiency.
Yeah.
And so we also look at how well we're doing in our core processes. So how well we design our programs. Do we take into account previous learning and knowledge in applying them to our future planning? How well do we partner? How accountable and transparent are we? And we have a process in place in which we're trying to do assessments and measurement and really encourage reflective learning of our own people and others within that. And of course, the last and most challenging part of it is how are we actually making a difference in the world? Because at the end of the day, we can be doing the other two really well, but we're not making a difference in the lives of the poor communities that we work with, then what's the point of it all?
If your programs don't.
Exactly. And so the most challenging part of how we assess our effectiveness is actually looking at the substantive, long-lasting changes that have occurred in the contexts that we work in.
Okay, very interesting. A final question before I get to the more career part of the interview is, what leadership skills, both formal and informal, do you feel are crucial to be an effective leader at your level in CARE US? What does it mean to be a good leader in CARE US?
Yeah, that's a really interesting question. And actually, just last week, my unit, we went on a retreat, and we did, one of those personality assessments.
Like Myers-Briggs?
It's something close to Myers-Briggs, not quite Myers-Briggs, but and it assesses various parts of your personality and where your preferences are, etc. And I found it very interesting. I hadn't done this before, because it looks at you how much you like to plan and have control and are risk averse, and how much you look to the future, want to do future planning, and how much you sort of consider sort of emotional / connective, connecting with other people issues. And so those are the 4 quadrants. And amazingly enough, apparently, I fall smack in the middle of all of them. I have equal preference across the 4. And I had never really thought about that. But that, to me, is really reflective of what I've had to apply in this position in trying to take change processes forward within CARE. It's equal measures planning and being very specific about what you want to do and what you can deliver and when you can do it.
Yeah.
It's about noting what are the risks and how you would manage them and being slightly conservative around that. But at the same time, you have to have a vision. You have to be future thinking. You have to think strategically about, because you're not talking about the present and maintaining the present.
Right.
You're talking about the future, which has uncertainty in it, and you've got to be able to see that future and to show that to others.
Yeah.
And at the same time, you've got to manage processes politically and know when are the strategic alliances and where have you pushed someone too far and how do you need to sort of work those issues and sort of being the sort of connector around them. And only because I just took that test, and I will say that it really did strike me when we were doing this sort of reflection around it, that it is, at my level at least, in leading these types of processes forward, it is an equal dose of all four of those that really you have to bring in and keep in the fore all the time.
Yeah.
It's a bit of a balancing act.
That is a very neat capturing of what a good leader should be. That makes sense to me. Now I want to ask you a couple of things about how your career came about and to give students an idea of what they should prepare for. First, how did you yourself become interested in transnational activism? I know from your bio that you actually worked in academia before.
Yes, and actually what is not quite mentioned in my bio, because it's restricted to a paragraph, is prior to going into academia, I worked as a development practitioner within my own country of Pakistan. And I did that for many years. And that was my first dose of what is development, what do international NGOs do, what is, what is the role of transnational NGOs within this. And so that led to me being very, very committed to the sort of ground level transformations that, as a Pakistani working in development and seeing what is happening, particularly with women, my focus at that time, and it still continues to be a lot of work around women's empowerment and gender issues. And so I did from there transfer to academia for a few years, as you noted in my bio, and I did some teaching and so forth. And then I was able to come back into, and really take a lot of what I was teaching around why development and what it means and how can we measure it and how can we plan for it and bring that back into an organization like CARE and really apply it. So I guess my first beginnings, I'll go back to the first experience I had when I was a master's student in Pakistan and had to go up to the northern areas and do field work. And as strange as it may sound, it was one of the first times I realized how poor a country Pakistan was. I was from a relatively privileged, middle-class, urban family. And that sort of stuck with me and stayed and really drove in me the need to be instrumental in the transformations that are needed to make sure that doesn't continue to happen.
Yeah, interesting. Tell us, please, what a typical day for you looks like. What should students imagine?
Yes, when you imagine you're working for a large humanitarian and development organization, you imagine you're doing exciting stuff. And really,
not so.
I spend a lot of time in front of a computer. I answer a lot of emails. I sit in a lot of meetings. And the times when I'm not in front of the computer or in meetings, I am usually on an airplane traveling to somewhere that I can be in more meetings. So I will say, though, that at the beginning of my career that I just described, it was quite different. At that time, and I did spend quite a few years, in the field, as it's still called, and I really don't like that word, but it's out there where the operations are, where we're actually trying to enact the transformation. And that was quite different. But now that I've been kicked upstairs enough, I'm usually in front of the computer or in meetings.
So that gives students a good overview of the kind of the development they themselves may also make as they go up in their career.
It's exciting in the beginning, and then you become like this boring director person who does nothing.
Finally, what career advice do you want to give to those students who wish to pursue an NGO career? What can they do now in their graduate degrees in particular, as well as undergraduate, to prepare in school and outside of school?
Get a good grounding in what it actually takes to enact the transformations that they aspire to. It doesn't mean that their career will continue to be at that level. Often it doesn't. Like I said, I started at that level. I started working with women in households, in communities, and actually at that time it was called Women in Development, really telling you how far ago it was, in trying to, just work with them to enhance their income or to get them better skills in agriculture. But until you understand the difficulties involved in a transformative process like that, it's very difficult to work at any other level with any sort of authority or real understanding of what's going on. So eventually you might move on to, or fairly quickly move on to policy analysis. You might be doing advocacy, you might be doing, other things, fundraising, whatever it is. But until you understand the sort of dynamics of what it takes, and this is true for whichever background you come from. I know for people who might be coming from those contexts, it becomes a little bit easier to be involved at that level. But I'd urge, other students, whether they're from the U.S. or Europe or wherever they're coming from, to actually invest in some time where they get to know those processes, and they can do that domestically. It's just as valid to go and work in a food bank or a shelter to actually understand what happens in people's lives and how difficult it is to bring about those change, but also how important it is to do that.
Thank you. That brings me to the end of this interview. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you for having me. It was a pleasure.